Today's lesson is about membranes and the cavities that they create. Remember, there's two membranes. So if I have an organ that's shaped like this, then I'm going to have two layers of membranes around it. One right next to the organ, and then the other one further away from the organ. And remember, the space in between is filled with fluid. Okay. Now let's go ahead and talk about the actual cavities. This back here, going from the skull down, all the way down the back, is the dorsal cavity. It contains two other cavities. It consists of the cranial cavity that is only, it has the brain, and then the vertebral canal or cavity that contains the spinal cord. That is all you have to know about the dorsal cavity. Remember, when it comes to organs, cranial cavity has the brain, vertebral cavity has the spinal cord. Now let's go on to the ventral or the anterior cavity. This right here contains all of the ventral or the anterior cavity right here. Now, it's divided into two cavities, the thoracic cavity and the abdominopelvic cavity. And what divides it is the diaphragm, which is a smooth muscle that lays between the two. We're going to move to an anterior view in just a second, but I want to be sure that everybody understands there's two main cavities, the dorsal or posterior cavity, which contains the cranial cavity and vertebral cavity, and then the ventral or anterior cavity, which contains the thoracic and the abdominopelvic, which also contains the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. Okay, let's look at another view. Okay, here's the other view. You can still see the cranial cavity and the vertebral cavity or canal, but mainly what we're going to concentrate right here are the organs that you find in the thoracic cavity, which is above the diaphragm. Remember, the diaphragm is what divides the thoracic cavity from the abdominopelvic cavity. Okay. Right here, you have the left pleural cavity. It surrounds one organ, the lung. Over on this side is the right pleural cavity. It surrounds one organ, the right lung. So these pleural cavities encompass the lungs. Then you have this area in the middle called the mediastinum. The mediastinum encloses this area right here and the heart area here. It includes the esophagus, the trachea, the aorta, and the heart. The heart itself is within another cavity called the pericardial cavity, and it surrounds specifically just the heart. Now, below the diaphragm, you have the abdominopelvic cavity, and it's divided in the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. Let's concentrate on the lower abdominopelvic cavity at this time. The abdominal cavity has all the organs that are not in the other cavities, the thoracic and the cranial and vertebral column, and also it has a dividing line of the pelvic, but it is not an actual dividing line. The pelvic and the abdominal cavities are in one big area called the abdominopelvic cavity. There is no division between the two. So all the organs are in there. The best way to think about it when you think about the organs of the pelvic cavity, think about everything that goes out of the body. the lower intestines, which would include the rectum, the bladder, which is part of the urinary system, and the urethra that goes and exits out the body, and then the male and female reproductive organs are all in the pelvic cavity. All the other digestive organs, the liver, the pancreas, the stomach, the small and large intestines are in the abdominal cavity. Has this drawn out a little bit better, I believe, in the book and in some of the PowerPoint presentations. Sorry, that was Sally saying hello. I think that gives you the main idea about the cavities. There's one other thing I want to be sure you understand about the cavities is remember there's 2 layers to every one of them. So surrounding the right pleural cavity, I have 2 membranes, the visceral pleural membrane and the parietal pleural membrane. Visceral always goes against the organ, and the parietal is further away. The same thing with the pericardial. I have the visceral pericardium and the parietal pericardium. The same thing with the abdominopelvic area. This abdominopelvic area is called the peritoneum. So I have the visceral peritoneum and the parietal peritoneum. Hope this helps. See you guys later.